The last scheduled ferry to Blackwater Island departed from Harwick Harbor on November 3rd, 2007. I know the exact date because I've looked at the manifest 40 times. 14 passengers, 1 vehicle. The MV Coalhaven, a 40-year-old steel-hull boat that could carry maybe 60 people in weather it had no business running in. That was the last official crossing. The ferry service was cancelled the following week. The dock infrastructure was decommissioned. The Coalhaven was sold for scrap. And yet in the 18 months I've lived in this town, I've met at least 5 people who've been to that island. Not before the ferry stopped. After. They came back. They're still here. They go to work. They eat at the diner. They buy groceries. But something about them is wrong. Not broken, not damaged, just quieter. Like someone turned down a dial inside them and they didn't notice, or they noticed and they didn't mind. I've been trying to figure out how they got there. Nobody drives boats to Blackwater. There's no charter service. The currents between here and the island are bad enough that the Coast Guard posted warnings that are still up. I don't understand how people are reaching an island that nobody goes to, on water that nobody crosses, using transportation that doesn't exist. But they are, and they keep coming back different. My name is Owen. I'm 34. I moved to Harwick, Maine, in the spring of last year because my marriage had ended and I needed to be somewhere that didn't remind me of anything. Harwick delivered. It's a harbor town, about 20 minutes north of places people have actually heard of: lobster tourism, outlet malls, that stretch of coast that looks nice on postcards. Harwick isn't on the postcards. Harwick is what you drive through to get to the postcards. The downtown is 2 streets of brick buildings, half of them with plywood in the windows. There's a diner, a hardware store, a laundromat, and a bar called the Wheelhouse that smells like it hasn't dried out since the 90s. The harbor still functions a few lobster boats, a marine fuel station, a bait shop. But everything has that specific look of a place that knows its best. Years are archaeological. I got a temp job with the Harbor Authority office, digitizing old records, manifests, maintenance logs, tide reports, inspection certificates, decades of paperwork that had been sitting in filing cabinets in a storage room that smelled like mildew and mouse droppings. The pay was low. The work was boring. That was the point. My supervisor was a woman named Ruth, who'd worked for the Harbor Authority for 26 years and spoke almost exclusively in sighs. She showed me the filing system, gave me a login for the scanning software, and said, "Don't throw anything away without asking, even if it looks like garbage, especially if it looks like garbage." For 3 months, I scanned papers, ferry schedules, fuel invoices, crew rosters, weather advisories, routine municipal archaeology. I listened to podcasts and drank bad coffee and didn't think about my ex-wife and told myself this was what starting over looked like. Then I found the manifest dated March 2009. It was in a folder labeled Blackwater MISC, handwritten, a single sheet. 3 names, a date, and a departure time. It looked exactly like the other ferry manifests I'd been scanning, same form, same format, same boxes for passenger count and cargo weight. But the Blackwater ferry stopped running in November 2007. I'd already scanned the final manifest, 14 passengers, November 3rd, the last one. This one was dated 16 months later. 3 passengers, no vessel name. I thought it was misfiled, a clerical error. Someone using an old form for a different route. I checked the names against the harbor authorities' records. All 3 were Harwick residents. All 3 were still alive. All 3 still lived in town. I mentioned it to Ruth. Showed her the manifest. She looked at it for a long time, longer than a clerical error warranted. Then she put it back in the folder and said, "Some of the old filing is a mess. Don't worry about it." She didn't look at me when she said it. I went back to the folder that afternoon and found 6 more manifests. Different dates: 2009, 2011, 2014, 2016, 2019, 2023. Each one had between 1 and 4 names, all handwritten. No vessel listed, no captain's signature, no return time. 21 names total. I cross-referenced every one of them. 18 were current or former Harwick residents. The other 3 I couldn't find, but 2 of those names matched people listed as missing on a regional database I found through a simple search. I printed the list. I put it in my bag. I didn't tell Ruth. But before I left the office that afternoon, I did one more thing. I pulled the tide reports, the same ones I'd been scanning for weeks. I matched the departure times on the manifests against the tidal data. Every crossing, every single one across 17 years happened during the same narrow window. A 90-minute period when the current between the mainland and Blackwater goes slack. It happens maybe 5 or 6 times a month. Irregular, determined by lunar cycles and seasonal drift. You'd need a chart and a calendar to predict it. The people on those manifests said they didn't remember the crossing, said they just needed to go and then they were there. But they all left during the exact same tidal window. Every time. 17 years. 21 people. The same 90 minutes. I sat at my desk, looking at that pattern, and something shifted in my stomach. Because that's not coincidence. That's scheduling. And if they don't remember choosing to go, then they definitely don't remember checking a tide chart before they went. That night, I went to the wheelhouse and sat next to a man named Dale, who'd been lobstering out of Harwick since before I was born. We'd talked a few times. He was the kind of guy who'd tell you his whole life story, but only in fragments, scattered across weeks of bar conversations, never in order. I bought him a beer and asked him about Blackwater Island. He didn't react the way Ruth did. He didn't go quiet or look away. He just nodded, like he'd been waiting for someone to ask. "Used to be about 40 people living out there," he said. "Year-round, had a school, a church, a little store, generator power, no grid. The kind of place that either makes you tough or makes you strange." What happened to it? They pulled everyone off in '07, said the infrastructure was failing. Septic, generator, the dock was rotting. Too expensive to maintain for 40 people. Is that the real reason? Dale drank his beer, took his time. The infrastructure was failing, he said. That part's true. But people had been living without decent infrastructure out there for decades. They didn't care. The state cared because people started not coming back right. Not coming back right. How? Hard to explain. You'd go visit someone on the island, family, friend, whatever, and they'd be fine. Normal. Happy, even. But then they'd come to the mainland for something, supplies or a doctor's appointment, and you'd notice they were less interested, less connected, like the visit to the mainland was an errand they wanted to finish so they could get back. He set his glass down, and the longer someone stayed on that island, the worse it got. You'd have people who grew up here, born and raised, family going back generations. And after a few years on Blackwater, they'd come to the mainland and look at this town like they'd never seen it before. like it meant nothing to them. And the evacuation fixed that. Dale looked at me. The evacuation got them off the island. Whether it fixed anything, he shrugged. You've met Gil Theriot? I had. Gil ran the bait shop by the fuel dock. Quiet guy, polite. But there was something about him, a flatness, a remove, like he was watching the world through a window instead of standing in it. Gil was born on Blackwater, Dale said. Lived there until the evacuation. He's been on the mainland 17 years now, and I still don't think he's all the way here. He finished his beer. Some people, that island got into them so deep that dry land never took hold again. I started paying attention to names, not actively investigating, just noticing, cross-referencing the manifest names with faces I saw around town. And once I started looking, I couldn't stop seeing it. Of the 18 identifiable names on those post-cancellation manifests, I could put faces to 11. They lived in Harwick. They had jobs, routines, ordinary lives. But they all shared something, a quietness that didn't feel like introversion. It felt like distance, like they were standing a half step further from the world than everyone else, and the gap was invisible unless you knew to look for it. The woman at the laundromat who stared at the dryers for 45 minutes without blinking, then apologized when I said her name, not startled, just slow to register that someone was speaking to her. The man at the hardware store who sold me caulk, and whose hands, I noticed, were red and raw, salt-cracked, the kind of hands you get from extended time on open water. He'd been a postal carrier his whole life. The retired teacher at the diner who sat alone every morning and ordered coffee and never drank it, just held it every morning. Same booth, same cup, growing cold. And when I asked the waitress about her, the waitress said, "That's Donna Kelly. She used to be the funniest person in town. That was before." She didn't say before what. I found Manny Costa through the Coast Guard station's public records. Retired, 71, living in a house on Ridgeback Road with a view of the harbor. He'd served at the Harwick station for 19 years, including the period when the ferry was still running. I showed up at his door on a Tuesday afternoon, told him I was digitizing records, and had some questions about the island. He let me in, made coffee, didn't ask why I was really there, which meant he already knew. "The manifests," I said, "after the ferry was canceled, people still going over." He nodded. "How?" I said. "There's no boat service. The currents are dangerous. How are people getting to an island 4 miles offshore?" Manny stirred his coffee slowly. "We used to find boats," he said, "drifted up on the mainland side. Skiffs, dinghies, little aluminum jobs. Engines still warm. Nobody in them. We'd check the registration, track down the owner, and 9 times out of 10 it was someone local who'd say they lent it out, or it must have slipped its mooring. And the people? We'd find them on the island eventually, or they'd show up back in town a few days later. Always alive, always fine, physically fine." He paused. "They'd say they didn't remember how they got there. Not lying, you could tell. They genuinely didn't remember the crossing, just said they needed to go, and then they were there." "Needed to go," I repeated. "That's how they all describe it. Not wanted, needed, like a compulsion, like thirst." He looked at me directly for the first time. "The island doesn't take people, Owen. People take themselves there. The island just makes them need to." "Makes them how?" He shook his head. "I don't know. I ran boats for 19 years, been out on that water more times than I can count. Never felt it, but I've talked to people who have, and they all say the same thing. It starts as a thought, not a voice, not a vision, just a thought that feels heavier than the others. A thought about silence, about being somewhere where nothing needs you and you don't need anything. And the thought doesn't go away. It just gets heavier and heavier until one night you find yourself at the harbor and there's a boat and the water is calm and you go. He drank his coffee. The scary part isn't that people go, he said. It's that they come back and they're fine with having gone. They're not scared. They're not confused. They're just settled, like something in them finally stopped reaching. I should have left it alone, I know that. I'm a temp worker scanning documents for $11 an hour. This isn't my mystery. These aren't my people. I came here to disappear into boring work and quiet evenings, and the uncomplicated rhythm of a town where nothing happens. But Manny had said something that stuck in me, like a hook. A thought about silence, about being somewhere where nothing needs you. I don't know how to explain this without it sounding like more than it was. I wasn't drawn to the island. I didn't hear voices. That thought he described, about silence, about a place where you don't have to be anything. I'd had that thought before. I'd had it for years. I just didn't know there was a place that matched it. I asked Dale if he'd take me across. He said no. Twice. The third time I asked, he said, "I'll take you to the shallows, 1/4 mile out. You can take the dinghy in from there. But I'm not setting foot on that island, and I'm leaving at 4 whether you're back or not." We left at 6 in the morning on a Thursday, November. Cold enough that the spray off the bow felt like needles. The harbor fell away behind us, and then it was just ocean and fog and the low mechanical grind of Dale's engine. Blackwater Island came out of the fog slowly, not all at once in pieces, the shape of trees first, then roof lines, then the dock, or what was left of it. Concrete pilings with the wooden platform mostly collapsed, a rusted crane arm hanging at an angle over the water, the old ferry terminal a small building with a flat roof and broken windows, painted a blue that had faded to gray. Dale cut the engine at the shallows. Helped me get the dinghy in the water. Didn't say anything. I rowed the last 1/4 mile myself. The first thing I noticed when I stepped onto the island was the silence. Not quiet, silence. The absence of sound so complete that my ears adjusted to it like eyes adjusting to darkness. No birds, no wind in the trees, no waves against the shore. Even though I could see the water moving, I couldn't hear it. Like someone had muted the world. The second thing I noticed was the air. It was warmer on the island than it had been on the water. Not by a lot, maybe 10 degrees, but enough that I unzipped my jacket, enough that the cold I'd been carrying in my chest since I got in the boat just loosened. I walked up from the dock along a gravel road that led into what had been the village. 12, maybe 15 structures. Houses, mostly. Small, weathered clapboard. The kind of New England coastal architecture that looks dignified even when it's falling apart. They weren't falling apart. That was the thing. 17 years of abandonment, and these buildings looked like they'd been maintained last month. No broken windows, no collapsed roofs, no trees growing through foundations. The paint was weathered but intact. The doors were closed. The steps were swept. I opened the first house I came to. The door was unlocked. Inside, a kitchen table with 2 chairs. A wood stove, cold. A shelf with books, paperbacks, water-swollen but readable. A bed in the back room, made. Blankets folded, pillow creased, like someone had left that morning. I checked 3 more houses, same thing. Clean, ordered, maintained, no personal items. No photos, no mail, no clothes in closets. But the bones of habitation were there. Soap by the kitchen sinks, wood stacked by the stoves, a coffee cup in the second house with a ring of residue at the bottom that was still damp. Still damp. I stood in that kitchen holding that coffee cup, and my hands weren't shaking, but they should have been. In the old school building, single room, 6 desks, a chalkboard, someone had written a list. Not on the chalkboard, on the wall, in pencil, small, careful handwriting, dates, dozens of them, going back years. Some had names next to them, some didn't. The most recent date was 11 days ago. People were coming here, regularly. Staying, leaving, coming back. A quiet rotation that nobody talked about and everybody knew about, and the island kept clean and ready, like a room waiting for guests who always arrived on schedule. I walked to the church, small, white, steeple leaning slightly east. The front door opened with a sound like a sigh. Inside, the pews were arranged in a circle instead of rows, facing inward, toward the center, where the altar should have been. There was nothing, just floor. Clean, swept, empty floor. But the wood in the center was darker than the rest, a slightly different shade, as if something had stood there for a very long time and had only recently been moved, or as if many people had stood in that exact spot, over and over long enough to stain the grain. I sat down in one of the pews. I don't know why I did that. There was nothing to sit for. Nobody was there. But I sat down, and the silence settled around me, and I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Nothing. Not sadness, not relief, not fear, nothing. A total, clean, absolute emptiness. Like someone had reached inside my chest and carefully removed every tangled thing, the guilt, the loneliness, the low, constant hum of needing to be somewhere or do something or mean something to someone, and left me hollow and light. It felt like breathing for the first time. It felt like what I imagined dying might feel like, if dying was gentle. I sat there for what I thought was 10 minutes. When I checked my phone, 2 hours had passed. I made myself leave the church. My legs didn't want to move. Not from paralysis, from contentment, from the particular resistance of a body that has finally stopped somewhere comfortable and resents being asked to continue. Outside, the light had changed, lower. The fog had thickened. The trees at the edge of the village looked taller, closer, though I knew they hadn't moved. I walked back towards the dock. My footsteps on the gravel were the only sound. Halfway to the shore, I stopped, turned around to look at the village one more time. And I saw my own footprints in the gravel, coming from the dock, leading to where I stood, clear, fresh, obvious. Next to them, a second set, same size, same shoe tread, same path, same stride length. But these prints were settled, dry. The gravel had shifted and resettled around them the way it does after hours of wind and weather. They looked like they'd been there since morning. I'd been the only person on this island. There had been no one else on the gravel road. But the prints were there, right next to mine, matching every step, and they looked like they'd been waiting for me to walk the path they'd already walked. The air behind me was warmer than the air in front, not by much, just enough to notice. At the dock, Dale's boat was visible in the distance, a dark shape in the fog. The dinghy was where I'd left it. I got in. I rowed. With every stroke away from the island, the silence thinned. First I heard the water slapping against the hull, alive and messy. Then the wind. Then Dale's engine, which he'd started when he saw me coming. Then a gull. Then another. By the time I reached his boat, the world was loud again. Aggressively, unnecessarily loud. "You're late," Dale said. He looked at me the way you look at someone who just walked out of a hospital. "How long were you in there?" "A few hours." He shook his head. "You left at 7:30. It's 3:15. He pointed at the sky. "Almost 8 hours, Owen." I'd been on the island for almost 8 hours. I remembered maybe 90 minutes of it. We didn't talk on the way back. The engine noise filled the space between us, and I was grateful for it, because I didn't trust what I'd say. The feeling from the church was still inside me, that lightness, that hollowed-out calm. And it was fading, and the fading felt like loss. When we reached the harbor, Dale tied up and said, without looking at me, "Don't go back." "I won't." "People say that," he said. "After the first time, they all say that." That was 3 weeks ago. I want to tell you I went back to normal. Scanned my documents, drank bad coffee, ate at the diner, lived my boring, uncomplicated temp worker life. Some of that's true. I did those things. I'm still doing them. But something is different now, and I don't know how to explain it without sounding like I'm either losing my mind or finding it. Colors are duller. Not dramatically, I'm not going blind. But the red of the diner booth looks less red. The blue of the harbor on a clear day looks less blue. Like someone adjusted the saturation down by 10%, and everything still functions, but nothing quite pops. Conversations feel heavier, not the content, the act. The physical process of listening to someone talk and formulating a response and pushing words out of my mouth feels like carrying something upstairs. It's not that I don't want to talk. It's that I've remembered what silence feels like, and talking is so much louder than I realized. I dream about the church every night. The circular pews, the dark stain on the floor, the emptiness that felt like an answer to a question I'd been asking my whole life, without knowing I was asking it. And the worst part, the part I haven't told anyone, is that I understand now. The people on the manifest list, the flatness, the distance, the way they hold coffee cups without drinking, the way they stare at dryer cycles and don't blink. They're not damaged. They're not broken. They're homesick. For a place that shouldn't feel like home, for an island that nobody lives on and everybody keeps returning to, for a silence so deep it makes every human sound feel like an interruption. I understand it because I feel it. That heaviness, Manny described the thought that doesn't go away. I have it now. It sits in the back of my skull like a low tone, and it hums loudest at night, when the town goes quiet but not quiet enough. Never quiet enough. Because true quiet is 4 miles offshore in a church with circular pews, and I've already been there, and I already know what it tastes like. Last Tuesday I drove to the harbor at 2 a.m. I didn't decide to. I was in bed, and then I was in my car, and then I was sitting in the parking lot by the fuel dock, engine off, window down, looking east. The water was black. The fog sat just offshore, a gray wall, and somewhere behind it was the island. I couldn't see it, but I could feel it, the silence of it, leaking across the water like cold air under a door, reaching the shore, reaching me. I sat there for 3 hours. When I left, I passed Gil Theriault's truck in the parking lot, and the retired teacher's sedan, and a car I didn't recognize with main plates and a back seat full of camping gear. all parked, all facing east, all empty. I don't know where those people were. I don't know if they were on the water. I don't know if they were already on the island. I don't know if they drove to the harbor for the same reason I did not to go, just to be closer, just to sit in the radius of whatever that silence is and feel the weight of the world get a little lighter. I went to the storage room at work the next morning and pulled the Blackwater folder. I was going to scan the manifests, document them properly, maybe send them to someone, a journalist, a researcher, someone who could look at this pattern and do something useful with it. I opened the folder. It was empty. Every manifest I'd found, all 6 sheets, 21 names, 17 years of impossible crossings, was gone. The folder was there, the label was there, but the pages had been removed, cleanly, no torn edges, no sign they'd been ripped out in a hurry. Just gone. I looked at Ruth. She was at her desk, doing paperwork, not looking at me. "Ruth," I said, "the Blackwater manifests." "I don't know what you're talking about," she said, still not looking up. "There were 6 post-cancellation manifests in this folder. Handwritten. I showed you one of them." "You showed me a misfiled document." I corrected the filing. "Where did you file it?" She looked at me, and the expression on her face was one I recognized, because I'd seen it on Dale's face and Manny's face, and the face of every person in this town who knew about the island, and had decided, long ago, that knowing was enough, that doing something about it was not their responsibility, that the best thing you could do with this knowledge was hold it quietly and hope it didn't hold you back. "Owen," she said, "leave it alone." "I can't," I said, and I meant it in a way she didn't understand. I didn't mean I wouldn't. I meant I was unable to. The island was in me now, not as a place, but as a frequency, a setting my brain had been tuned to that I couldn't untune. Every quiet room reminded me of a quieter room. Every empty street reminded me of an emptier one. Every moment of peace was a shadow of a deeper peace that was 4 miles offshore, waiting, patient, always ready. I'm not going to pretend I know what's happening on Blackwater Island. I don't. I don't know if it's geological, some gas, some frequency, some magnetic anomaly that alters brain chemistry. I don't know if it's psychological isolation, working on people who are already halfway to gone. I don't know if it's something else, something older, something that lives in the silence the way fish live in water, not visiting it, not creating it, but so completely part of it that there's no separation between the thing and the medium it exists in. I don't know, but I know this. Last night I went to the harbor again, 2 a.m., same parking spot, same black water, same wall of fog. And this time, there was a boat, a skiff, aluminum, tied to the fuel dock, engine off, nobody in it, nobody around. Just a boat that hadn't been there yesterday, sitting in the water like it had been placed there specifically for me. The keys were in the ignition. I didn't take it. I sat in my car, and I looked at it, and I didn't take it. But I turned the car off, and I sat there until sunrise, and when the light came up, and the fog pulled back, I could see the island, just barely, a dark shape on the horizon, low and flat, like something sleeping on the surface of the water. And I thought about the coffee cup on the kitchen counter, still damp, about the bed, still made, about the church, still arranged in that circle, all of it clean and ready and waiting, not for anyone in particular, just for whoever needed it next. I'm writing this from my apartment. It's 9 in the evening. The harbor is a 10-minute drive from here. The boat is probably still there. The tide is right, I checked. And the fact that I checked is the thing that scares me most, because I don't remember deciding to look up the tide chart. I just looked at it, the way you check the weather, the way you check the time, automatically, like part of me has already decided, and the rest of me is just catching up. I'm not going to go. That's what I keep telling myself. I'm going to close this laptop and go to bed, and wake up tomorrow and scan documents and drink bad coffee and be ordinary. But the silence is louder tonight. I can hear it under everything, under the heater, under the traffic on Route 1, under my own breathing. A low, patient tone, coming from the direction of the water. And there's something else. When I came home this evening, my shoes were by the door. That's normal, I always leave them there. But they were wet. Not rain wet, salt wet. The leather was stiff with it, and there was sand on the floor mat. Fine gray, beach sand, the kind that gets into the treads when you walk across a shore. I was at work all day. I didn't go to the harbor. I didn't go to any beach. I don't think I did. But the tide window opens again tonight at 1:47 a.m., and I already know that. And for the first time, I'm not sure if I'm hearing the island, or if the island is hearing me.